Okay. I think we're going live. Folks will tell me if they can't hear me. So, welcome everyone to another lovely edition of Wardley Mapping Conversations.
Tell me
Um,
if they can hear me.
uh,
That's me. I
Welcome
gotta
everyone.
mute you.
oh
There we
no,
go.
I I think a lot. That's a common experience for many people. Muting me is the way to go in general. Um, just kidding. I thought about writing a theme song for today, something about Wardley Maps and consultants, but I don't know. I lost my creative energy, and instead I poured it into sense making and making sense of what we got into last time. So this is the third in a series of discussions about exploring collaborative approaches, in particular as a replacement for competitive approaches. And of course, the question on my mind is like Wardley mapping. How does Wardley mapping enable, cooperation and so on? So I talked to Sue Borchard, who is here with us. She's at Contemplate This on the Twitters, and I also talked to Mike Haber. And Mike is, I think he's going to join us. He's Michael T. Haber on the Twitters as well. So he may show up later, and it should be a fun time. Um, so each of the three of us basically took a shot at making sense of a bunch of sticky notes that we generated in the last instance of this stream, the last time we talked about collaboration. So I thought maybe we could start with Sue's exploration, maybe. And Sue, I'm kind of curious, like, start with the thought process. Maybe we should look at like the raw material, and then like how do you get started with thinking about how to even make sense of messes like this?
Well, let's see. Um, I think I didn't start with our sticky notes.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Did you cheat?
but I did get there eventually. But so I mean, they were sort of in my head. Like I had all this fresh thinking about our conversations,
Uh-huh.
and I did that whole. I thought I was going to start mapping, like Wardley mapping, but then as I often do, I get a little bogged down with the loops because
Yeah,
the
okay.
linearity of Wardley mapping really stumps me a bit because
Hey
I think of everything as, oh, hey, Mike.
Mike.
I think
Yay.
of a lot of stuff as circularly dependent, interdependent.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Loopy.
yeah, so it came out, I
Yeah.
think, more as more, I don't know, something more akin to a value web than a value chain.
That's fair. Yeah.
And so I sent you that thing, and I did paste it on the board as well.
I do see it. Yeah.
And I gotta say, so the starting point was sort of like, okay, if I like really zoom way back out, given what we talked about, like what's shifted in my thinking, what do I think the need is? And I have to say, I can never stay in one frame for very long. I have like the tool sets in my head, and the
Yeah.
one that I'm reading about now is about this concept of evolvability from a couple of developmental biologists. And it does have some dovetail here with Wardley mapping, since evolution is like baked in. And that's not just a metaphor. I truly believe like this is like, I think this is Simon's home domain, or at least at one
Hmm.
point it was. And so this idea of evolvability is where I started, because I thought, well, what if what we're trying to advocate in the world is that there is a need, this is how I wrote it, I'll just read it. There's a need for all organisms to respond ably. That's like my responsible word, respond ably to change, whether it's inside changes like a person growing or aging, or an organization growing, or outside changes like a new boss or a shift in market pressures. So you And the reason I immediately branched out is because the need to respond ably has what I think are epochs. And they could be like, they could map actually to Simon's horizontal axis. Because in the most early stages, I called it viability, the first epoch of carving out like your first stable state.
Yeah.
And with the caveat that actually that in itself, before the first stable state of adulthood, that is actually like rapid fire. Like there's like this real tight loop of stability and instability in development, in human development, in individual human development. And so the basic need there is learning. And so that's sort of what I put down, learning. Below that is the basic need. That if am I like, I don't know what you're seeing, but I'm like scrolling. Can I share my screen? Would that help? Because then I can sort of talk and guide us at the same time.
I'm following along with you in Miro, and
Okay.
and
Oh, good.
I just sent
Okay.
Mike a link too, so he can find it there.
Awesome. So those three epochs are sort of the viability, the early stage, the continued viability. So that's like you've got that first stable state, but now stuff changes. You know, you lose your job, or you didn't find your mates, or your organization has to scale up, or whatever, or your market changes, or that's sort of the that first real hard challenge where adaptation is the main need. And then, like, let's say you actually get to this like super stable state. And I guess these would map to the right three of Wardley's sort of horizontal axis. If you get to that super stable state, you don't want to get brittle. You want to, so that's where it sort of evolvability becomes key. And so below those, I actually ended up with three like, well, five actually. Like everything kind of converges again on these five, like all three of these things, learning, adaptation, and evolvability, depend on this polarity here, which I'm going to just see if I can quick change the color so you can see where I am. Getting faster, more efficient, so the faster, better, cheaper stuff, and exploratory behavior. I mean, in fact, the first stage, we're dominated by exploratory behavior. You know, I mean, I spent hours in my backyard on a pogo stick. Why? I don't know. That has served me no good in my life. My sister probably thought I was a total nut job because I was her little sister, obviously. And she's like, oh, I don't know what that kid's doing out there for hours on a pogo stick. And then the other three that I brought in, and this is just like, I don't know, it's sort of like a random smattering of like models in my head that just came to mind. This is a model that came up from Perkins and Tishman when they were trying to study when people translate learning out of the classroom into the world and when they don't. And there's three things you need to sort of keep those skills expanding into new contexts. You need to have the skill, first of all. You need to be motivated to use it. Like if you understand how, you know, physics equations can help you figure out something about when a Mini collides with a Mack truck, you could do the computation, or you could just use something intuitive, which probably doesn't map, it doesn't give you the same answer actually as what you learned in your physics class. So you might just be lazy. I don't feel like plugging the equations in, right? Or you might not notice that this is a time when you'd want to translate this out into the world. This is a context where, oh, those math equations that I learned, I could use them here in the real world to address this puzzle that I have. And most of us assume, or most teachers, and this research that like was about classroom transfer of learning, assume that you didn't actually have the skill. But what Tishman and Perkins found was really you didn't notice the moment when it would be useful. And so like translate, like getting strategic in a meeting. Oh, is this a good time? Would strategy help? Well, this would be the moment to be sensitive to like, well, maybe we should map as opposed to some other tool. And so I think motivation is key, because remember when you did the live stream around yoga, and there was these sort of like, over here under motivation, there's sort of like this thing, like there's an impression that you needed something, like that, oh, my back hurts, maybe yoga would help. Like there was some motivation underneath that. This is like a Venn diagram: motivation, skills, and sensitivity, and in Shari Tishman and David Perkins' framing. So you need all three in order to accept something into a new context. And so I'm not going to keep going with this because it's big and long and there's more to it. But I feel like I sort of started to lay the landscape of where my thinking was. And then just to jump things really quick, then I was invited to just map these on a Wardley map, and I totally hit a wall. I'm like, I can't. I mean, I did it. I tried it. But it was like so much of what we named was our values, yours and Mike's and mine.
Yep. And
so I wasn't really sure what I was mapping. So I switched tools and went to, if you go to the right on the map, I went to Ella Ben-Ur's Innovator's Compass. And I tried there to get a little bit more of like, what did we talk about? And what are things we could try? And so the one that we've got on there is another live stream. And that's about it in terms of like this, like what we are what the three of us could try. Okay, that was a lot of talking, and Mike's joined. So I really want to like totally put a pin in that and just sort of let it settle and see what the impressions are of that.
Okay, I'll just blurt some things out. I think you're completely right that when you go, I can't map this, I think that's the right response. It's like when Simon's mapping how to do IT, the experts probably agree what the end result looks like. You use cloud computing and you develop Agile over here. This is how you meet users' needs. For collaboration, there's so many different contexts that trying to actually start off with a map, your experts aren't agreeing yet on even what your context is. So I think starting with your Innovator's Compass is a really good way to get our bearings. There you go. I will keep with your metaphor. I really like your ideas of the stages of viability and how that can actually map to what we're looking for. But what did strike me was that when you said you're in a meeting and you're thinking, is mapping useful now? Is now when I should do it? That's Udo, isn't it? Observing, orienting, and deciding that yes, now is a good time to do it. It's so much part of the skill, I think, because how many times have you come out of a meeting and a few hours later gone, I should have done that. It has to be that observe and go, now was the time I should be doing this. Even if it's making your own notes and then going, can I show you what I'm doing here?
Right. Yep.
That is such a skill to recognize when when these collaboration things, it's time to bring these in. What they are, of course, I am scrolling across your Miro board, so it's beautiful and completely disorientating at the same time.
Yes.
But I think that there's an implied value around Simon's traditional Wardley mapping, in that you're looking at reducing cost and it's competition, and it's, if you like, it's the me of the me versus we. And it's.
Can you repeat that, Mike? I think that was important, but I want to make sure I soaked it in.
I think Simon's traditional mapping, there's an implied value to it, and that is because it's working in capitalism, right? It's making things cheaper, it's doing things better for same, better for less, whatever the phrase is. And that actually makes them quite straightforward. People can agree that yes, this is better for less, this costs less, that's easy to work out. But collaboration has so many other different values associated with it. You've got your innovator's compass about what matters here, what do we care about. It's far more complex in the Cynefin domain. So you are looking at much less agreement, I think.
So I think this is gonna be really fun because so Mike, I want to take a little exploration into how you approached making sense of this, and then we can kind of like get the feel for the different perspectives that we have and how we each tried to make sense of the thing. And I love this kind of setup, which is like maybe this is the wrong tool for the job. Like maybe Wardley mapping in particular doesn't help us. It doesn't unlock the immediate kind of insight that something like the innovator's compass, or maybe one of the things that you did, Mike, that it doesn't. Maybe it's the wrong tool. And then after that, what I'm hoping to do is maybe use it anyway, and then see what happens, because I used mapping, and I think maybe there's like an opportunity to see how it could be used, but I think there's still this like order of like maybe mapping's like third or fourth on the list of things to try if you're thinking about some of these kinds of problems. So Mike, why don't you take us through what you kind of did here? I see you've got a section up above Sue's work here. And let's see.
I need to zoom out and try and find it.
And then...
If you follow Ben and I, we're both there.
Although I don't see you in the board, maybe...
You on the other board, Mike?
Did I send you to the abyss?
I don't know.
There's a link in the Zoom chat. Maybe that might be the link.
I think that's the one I clicked on.
Oh no!
Isn't it?
Oh, well, that's the one I'm on.
Well, that's fun. Let me see. I'm gonna do the bring everyone to me thing. Mike doesn't exist.
I mean, I'm not signed in. I think that might be it.
You should still show up as a guest.
That's true. Yeah. Well, that's fun.
Oh.
Did I paste the right link? I did. Yeah. I don't know.
I just checked it. Yeah.
I've clicked it again. I'm zooming out and I can't see my stuff. And I know I did some stuff on here.
Yeah. It's the furthest to the right. Can you see where Sue added some green stickies and things?
I can see some turquoise stickies and I can see Innovator's Compass.
And then it.
Are you on?
Okay, here's an idea. I will share my screen.
Okie dokie.
And then that should at least let you be able to see it, and then we can gotta think on our feet here. Does that look familiar at all?
It does a bit, yeah. If you could zoom in a little bit.
Where would you like me to start? In the top left?
Bottom left.
Bottom left. Yay.
So I think I tried to put things into kind of vertical columns, which kind of had some. I could make they kind of fitted together.
Okay.
If you like, so there's the way I made sense of everything that we could do was, you have the connecting people, Ben as putty, friction as a signal that things are needed. On the left, that's your kind of some goals there, if you like. The next column feels like some skills, recognizing tensions, big picture thinking, patterns, making sense of things, naming things. Maybe the skill that we mentioned earlier of saying, is now the time? Is now a good time to do this? Asking questions, naming conflicts. So those kind of things, I think that they're more kind of fungible, learnable things, if you like, that you can do. If you could zoom out again, and I tried to put an ability to notice moments of friction, loving when people are doing things, a duocracy, the kind of actions, if you like, aren't they? We can, something's happening when you do things there. The next column feels like inner stuff going on. sensitivity, visceral reactions, and things like that. So I just tried to split them out into vertical columns of things that looked a little bit similar.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so I think the second column is things that actually, when you start mapping, might fit on a map.
Skills. Makes sense.
Yeah, if you want to do something, it's like, what skills do I need to be able to? I was sat in a meeting and I realised we need to collaborate, and it's not going very well. So you put your facilitator cap on, and you start doing the right thing, hopefully. And that column of stuff is what needs to be in your toolbox for doing the right thing, and maybe some more things that you need to do. But to be able to, big picture thinking, frame the problem you've got, name things, get people on board.
Yep.
In the context of we're sat in a meeting room and we need to collaborate, that might be what you need.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense.
So definitely, I started moving the stickies into columns. It gets a bit messy, but certainly that actions column, those could be things that you need to be able to see patterns. Well, how do you see patterns? What's below patterns in the map? Names of things. What to call things. I've got a thing with OODA, observe. If you haven't got a name for something, you're probably not going to observe it. If you don't know what you're looking for,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to observe it. So there's a whole set of learnable skills, I think, in that second column. I'm going to stop there. Someone else can take over a bit.
All right. So then maybe just for contrast, I can share a little bit of what I did, and then after that we can, I think, have a little discussion about what we've learned from doing making sense of things in each of our own ways, and then like what is the implication, like what is the next like kind of way for us to make sense of this. What do we get from exploring things in this way? Because we're kind of like, we've defined an ontology of collaboration in a certain way. Like we brought forward all the things that our mind makes up whenever we think of the word collaboration. And now we're trying to sort those things and make sense of them. And what comes next after that? Once you have an ontology, what can you do? And I think that's kind of, I don't know. I think that's where it gets a little bit interesting. So, I just realized I don't have my stuff in the board, so I'm gonna copy and paste this real quick, and hopefully it won't explode. I'm gonna put this off to the far right. Oh goodness, far right towards the top.
Okay.
Just to the right of Mike's thing. Ooh, we gotta zoom out here.
Holy cow!
So
it looks dynamic, Ben. Whatever it is.
What is it?
It is a spider web. So I didn't.
I just need another. Can you do another level of zoom, Ben? Because I can't quite read what it says.
I wish, because we'll get there. So like I basically just took our original
Gotcha.
stuff here, and I just tried to use like the most flexible version of Ben Brain accessible to me. What could these words mean? How could they relate? Reading all sorts of meaning into everything and probably being very wrong most of the time. And then I just tried to turn that into a value chain. And I think it might be interesting to start at the bottom. And I'm not going to read all of these, but like there's this funny thing that seems to occur, that seemed to like actually creep up, that relates to some of the exploration around data related things that John Cutler and I did for a little bit, where we were like, there's like a pipeline of insights, and it all starts with data of some kind, and then it turns into something that is analyzable and then synthesizable, and then it turns into insights from the bottom. And I found that pipeline again here, where there's like the environment, and the environment enables like the accessibility of other people's contexts and puzzles, and it also enables things like naming things within the environment, and then it's like the research, like to access the environment you like do some kind of like interaction with it, and then that research turns into some like all sorts of things, like it encompasses explanations based on like questions that you've asked. I feel like yeah, like asking questions here, which you only ask those questions because of your ability to notice certain moments of friction in the conversation of like the collaborative kind of interaction. And so that research produces the opportunity to do sense making and synthesis, and from there you get some kind of insight. And when you learn something, you're putting it into action, right? Like you understand something, but you're also acting as a result. And so then there's just this whole like idea that like the after effects, the outcomes, if you will, come from doing stuff together. And so I literally tried to connect everything together, and I'm not sure it was useful.
I love it though. What's really putting a smile on my face is how you interpreted After Effects.
Oh, did they? is that Adobe? The Adobe?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was trying to get like hard skills that my work depends on, like script writing and After Effects. But I like yours because it's actually something that emerged for me, which is this framing of strategy that I got from Alnor Ibrahim on you need an emergent strategy when you're talking about a social change that's an ecosystem change. And so it's a focus on outcomes, and no single org can do it. And so I like your interpretation much better. I wouldn't even put an X there. I was like, I was puzzled when I first looked at it. I was like, how come the user needs After Effects as the primary need? I was like,
well,
sorry.
I love that too, because what's interesting is the words are so slippery. Like we walked away from them for like 2 weeks, right, or a week and a half, and we came back to them, and like I was trying to pick them up, and it's like they're oh, it's a squishy word. I can make it mean whatever I want it to mean, right?
No, but it's great. It's great, especially I mean unintended consequences, outcomes, after effect, like all these things are like really helpful.
It's not, you have to firm up the meaning of your words at some point, but not yet. I'm also thinking when Sue's got the bottom half of the map, that's when she fires up After Effects and starts doing a video.
Now I gotta find like the
it's
drawing.
True. After Effects for me is the bottom right. No one sees it.
Yep.
It's completely invisible. It's a stable skill that I must have. So for me, it's down there. But yeah.
So Ben, when you said you didn't know whether this had worked, it'd be interesting because the column I had of, I think that the far left-hand side column I had, those kind of appear at the top of your map. And the skills are kind of appear in the middle of your map. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think more or less roughly.
So, when I've stratified out the layers,
Ooh, and the internal stuff, Mike, is like all on the bottom, like bottom left, like sensitivity, visceral reactions, like.
Yeah, no one sees that, do they? No. So I think I've kind of got some outcomes and some. The way I've split this up isn't that different to you, Ben. Only yours is a bit more on its side and with some lines between it.
I think there's like something too about like mixed ontologies, like because the three of us had like, we basically just made a giant list from our three different perspectives, and I think what's interesting is if the outcomey kind of stuff ends up floating to the top just because that's the easiest way to think about it. Whereas like the very detail-oriented or skill-oriented stuff kind of floats lower, ends up being underneath that. Like that's, I bet you could probably just generally speaking find some patterns around like how people would expect something to show up in a value chain. Like, oh, I would expect this to be higher up towards something that's providing user needs, or something lower down. it's interesting. But like now I'm confronted with like the question of like, is this even a useful model? So, okay, Wardley mapping, right, is claims, right, that it's about making models. And so what we've done is we've each made, we've used a couple models to describe the situation that we're, like collaboration as a situation. And the question is the model useful?
Well, I have some things I want to put here out on the table.
Excellent.
So first of all, I do think that it's a useful frame. First off, not for getting strategic, but to look at what has evolved. And what has evolved tells me not what are our values necessarily, but what have we been valuing? What is driving the evolution? What's driving the selection of what has become stable and what we have stacked stuff on top of that's gotten really sort of foundational. And so I've put a few questions down on Post-its. But the first two things are what Mike said about mapping has an implied value baked in, that doing more for less, sort of a capitalist frame.
Yep.
I want to put back on that because it's a common claim that my attempts to understand evolutionary processes doesn't sync with. Yes, it's competition, but it's competition and collaboration, competition and cooperation, because there's just as much collaborative behavior selected for in the natural world as there is competitive behavior. So one needn't buy, this is kind of a challenge here, one needn't buy the claim that competition drives stuff right. It's simply not true. I should say it simply is true, but it's not the only thing that drives things right.
Yeah.
And so that to me is a really key point to be made, that there are forces moving things towards stability that are not just about scarcity or competing for the rare resource. And so I was thinking about what you said, Mike, about when, like the sensitivity to like when would be a good moment to get strategic, or when would be a moment of friction. And for me, that one of the questions that I find, I mean, the answers maybe, or the indicators in groups, is the most scarce thing driving the conflict seems to often be airtime. The most scarce thing is, can we take the time to really make sense of our disparate perspectives? Do I have time to do it? If it's the bigger the group, the more scarce that resource is. I mean, even in my Quaker context, we gather for decision making, and it's always plenary. Everyone is listening to whoever speaks. It's a one to all relationship, which inherently makes the airtime super duper scarce. There's not breakouts. Let's make sense of this over here, so I can blah blah blah. You know, how do I know what I think until I hear what I say? Like, it doesn't give me the chance to do that and hear other people. And so, these questions I have, like, when are we? I have one. When are we facing a challenge that's worth getting strategic about? And I have some thoughts on that. One is, it's a big challenge, and we don't know how to get there from here. That seems like, wait, okay, maybe we need to get strategic about this. Unpredictable. We don't have the information we need. It might be like, we might know for a fact that it's several years out, if not longer. I would say that there has to be a somewhat clear shared sense of what it is we're trying to create in order to get strategic about it. If we don't know what our purpose is, we can't get strategic about it. And the other thing I think is that it's got lots of distributed roles and people acting in diverse contexts. And so you want the strategy to be enactable locally. Does that make any sense? Like this sort of heuristic approach where, oh yeah, this thing I'm doing, that is in line with whatever our strategy is. Yeah.
That makes a lot of
So
sense.
those are my thoughts on like when. But then so I already challenged the notion that competition is the driver towards the right. And I'll just, case in point, collaborative behaviors evolved. So, okay, like that should say something right there. And I've already talked about what's scarce, which resource. And so I know I'm bringing a lot of models in that are in my head that nobody else knows about, that really come from adaptive culture and evolutionary theory and developmental biology. But I want to kind of stop there because I find like values and value chain, I think that is one of the meatiest, richest parts of Wardley mapping, but not values in a transactional sense and not values in a, these are my personal values that I aspire to, but just values in the selection, natural selection context, which is what is being selected for.
Okay, I have some questions.
Okay. Sorry, I know that's blah, blah.
Values as in what is being selected for. Because, so when I heard you say that capitalism and evolution, I forget precisely the way that you put it, but it seems like there's a conflation that's happening there, where it's like, which causes the other? Does capitalism cause evolution, or does evolution cause capitalism?
Right, and I don't think we could ever tease the loopiness apart. I mean, that's the thing. Sometimes when I finish a map, I'm like, oh my God, I could totally turn this thing upside down. Easily. Like,
yeah, and I think...
Like, yeah.
There's something about like the way that things flow and transact between the nodes is like, and I'm using transact more to just like imply flow, right? That the way things flow between components, like there's bidirectionality to that too, which is like, I think I haven't figured that problem out, the cyclicality thing, like how to represent that well, or what heuristics to do. Is it that you have to break stuff down or whatever? But like I want to zero in on the biological evolution question here, because I think there's something here about how capitalism is just one mode that emerges from this like evolution thing. What if collaboration is just as likely? Like what if the hows, like what if these are just different kind of stabilities? So tell me if I'm thinking about that wrong. You have the face that tells me that I very much am, and so I'm not surprised.
No. It's just that I don't think of capitalism as competitive necessarily. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people working together sometimes to make money. So I think of these as more. I have in my mind this whole theory of graceful extensibility, which is that the pull towards faster, better, cheaper, and efficiency has to be balanced with its interdependent other pole of extensibility in order for something to sustain its viability. So capitalism tends to focus on faster, cheaper, better, but extensibility, that evolvability thing that I put on my map, that is the thing that allows you to develop. It's like resilience in a way. I think the reason that David Woods didn't use the word resilience was because he said it just meant too much to people already. So he called it extensibility, but the biologist that he cites called it evolvability. So it's weird. I have an example actually from biology, but I'm afraid to share it. But okay, I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get weird.
Right. Although, in biology, it's microtubules. The polymerization of microtubules, they form little highways and they form and deconstruct. It's like it's forming at one end and deconstructing at the other end, unless something stabilizes it and it sustains its random nature. They create these highways in any direction. If they fell in a rut of directionality, it would totally screw up the whole mechanism. But this is what allowed metazoans to evolve in a vast array of cell morphologies, shapes and sizes, because of this mechanism. So basically the way the biologist, I'm just going to draw in here.
Yes,
The
please.
biologists describe this as an hourglass mechanism where there's huge variability below. And then you've got this weird knot here, which has not changed in the entirety of the entire metazoan clade. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that word or not. Metazoan clade is like a huge branch of the evolutionary tree. So a knot, microtubules act as a knot because it's a highly random, conserved layer in an entangled layered network of organisms. Now, another one that might be more easily relatable is sewing seams. So sewing seams, you have all this variety of, fibers and fabrics that you can cut and sew into garments, but sewing, like a million different kinds of things, garments we never even imagined, right? And nothing's changed in sewing for hundreds and hundreds of years, right?
Yeah.
So these are like special layers, and I've really been just racking my brain about this in light of like Wardley maps. I'm like, oh my God, like what would happen if I mapped like the parts and holes? And where do microtubules fit in? Or sewing seams. Sewing seams would be a lot easier because garment manufacture is a much more fits in the model, but it's a layer that, or it fits into a capitalist model. Like there's a product, right? But the variability means that all these other people can innovate new products that other people haven't even figured out they wanted yet.
Because there's a stability here.
Because of this thing. And so I guess that's like, in some ways it's commodity, but it's more of a process. It's a whole little ecosystem itself. It's a process. It's a function. And it's a tool. Sewing machines haven't changed that much either.
Okay, I have a question. So if you kind of like look at the Wardley map structure, right? We've got your evolution from left to right, and of course they're like the 4 stages or whatever. The one doctrinal principle is that efficiency enables innovation.
Right.
So like things down here that are highly evolved enable things up here which are new and uncertain and weird, and it's because this thing is stable that is able to happen. But then the weird thing about that, so power is like the quintessential example that people talk about, like as in like 120 volts or 240 or whatever, depending on where you're from, and 60 hertz or whatever. I don't know anything about power, but like underneath that is a whole beautiful world of complexity, and it's almost like there's a line drawn right here, and it's like, and I'm not sure if I'm understanding this correctly, and you're gonna have to tell me if I'm getting this right or wrong, but I'm seeing this knot as being kind of like the interface. Like people.
This thing is the knot. I think this thing is the knot right here. Maybe. I think it is.
Like the green line?
The X.
The X. Got it.
Like, sewing seams. Like that enables all kinds of innovation.
But what's underneath sewing seams, I guess, Let me play with this just for a moment. Like imagine like there's hydrogen power over here, like let's say.
Yeah.
So there's hydrogen power over here, and then there's like, well, I don't know, I'm just gonna put A maybe. And then there's fossil fuels over here, and like maybe solar's over here. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how this works. I'm not a power doctor. But there's a whole weird world of like, how do you distribute this stuff? How do you generate it and all that kind of stuff? And even that alone is interesting, right? Because regardless, this part, the actual like wall power that customers get has to stay the same, because that interface stability is what actually enables that complexity up above it. Meanwhile, these things can change.
Right. So that I just for shared language, I think that underneath the biologists call weakly linked functionality, which I think is really kind of I don't know. I think it's going to become important later. So I'm just going to say it, put pin in it, and move on. But I think it's going to become important at some point.
Is that similar to like loose coupling?
I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. So where do we go from here?
So I want to just name one more thing, which is that sometimes that knot is getting in the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
For instance, if every time you say something, my default stable built-in reaction is to dismiss you or argue with you or debate with you, then it's not supporting innovation. It's actually supporting some stuckness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And some stuckness that may have worked in the past.
Yeah. It was totally adaptive at one point. Totally, Mike. That's why it destabilized, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I did name unlearning in my weird web of value over there.
Oh, exciting.
Thoughts, Mike.
I had a thought, but it was like 5 minutes ago, way over to the left of the canvas.
You put it on a sticky?
Well, what I realised, is it Chris Argus? I don't know if that's his name.
Argyris?
And he says
Argyris,
there's your espoused theory and your theory in action. And what I've realised Wardley mapping is doing here, we have our espoused values and our values in action. And if you map what you actually do, you get your values in action. You can't hide behind, these are my espoused values, this is what I believe in, if it doesn't line up to what you do. So when you were on this side, I was noticing that because Wardley mapping is fairly action based, what do you actually do?
Yeah. If you start from behaviors,
if you always buy the cheapest thing, you can't say that I like to pay extra for a bit of quality and some craftsmanship. If you always buy the cheapest thing, what you do, really, you can't hide behind another set of values. And the mapping that we've been doing, I've noticed, is that there might be some, values which, we say one thing, but this is what matters to us because this is what we do.
Totally.
That's very useful. That when we start mapping these collaboration things, you might say you value collaboration, Sue, but if every time you dismiss me when I open my mouth,
right,
there's your values in action. And I think I'm going to sleep on that, but that feels quite powerful because it's quite often quite hard to separate those things for people.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I've included that on my map as a mismatch. I put it over way over here as a growing awareness that there's a mismatch between my model of the world and what I think I do and what I actually do, basically, or what I think the world works and the way the world actually works. It can be inside or outside. So I think that's key, Mike. In terms of having some motivation to try a tool, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
And that actually going back to Bernie's original comment about punctuated equilibriums in the chat, I was just thinking I was just thinking about woodworking, something that I'm not very good at, but whenever I find a reason to start learning something new, like there's this sudden explosion of other activities around it, like tools that I need to get and, YouTube videos that I need to watch and learn about something. And there's this like flurry of activity of just like all of a sudden a bunch of different stuff all at once. And it is triggered by that awareness that so something is amiss between the skills that I have and the skills that I need, and the way that I thought the world works is no longer going to be good enough for me to proceed. And that triggers a whole bunch of like learning.
Well, so this, we got like 10 minutes left.
Yes.
And I'm still like, I really enjoy these conversations and I have no idea where they're going.
Yep.
Exploratory behavior, as the developmental biologists say, is key for extensibility. So I feel like that's what this is. Like that's what we are doing is exploratory behavior. It's like playing in the sandbox and we have no idea what for.
So that's on the X on the map with the green line underneath it. That's your kind of stuckness. And that
Wait, are we
enables
stuck?
things. But it enables Y, right? It's stuck for a good reason. It enables Y.
Stable.
Stable, that's right. But you might want to change it. If we scroll back to Ben's map,
My apologies.
which things on there might have the same sort of attributes?
As
Which things?
The stuckness?
The stuckness enabling things, yeah.
The stableness. I don't want to use stuck because that usually implies I want to be unstuck.
No, you're right.
Like I want to get rid of it. So,
but there's some. Are there any stable things that are on? The equivalent of.
yes. The these they call. Oh, I have language.
Yay! Language.
The two biologists that I've been reading call it constraints that deconstrain. Those are the knots that you like. Sewing seams and microtubules are constraints that deconstrain.
I'm going to write this down.
And so, Mike, I think those are the kind we're talking about, not the constraints that feel like they're actually holding us back from what we want to do.
Is that like enabling?
Well, I wonder. I know whenever I say anything about enabling constraints in a conversation with Alicia Herrero, she's always like, well, like, I don't know if that's what, so I hesitate to use that expression, but I will fly it by her in our next conversation.
I'll just put three question marks next to it.
I think she would say so, though. I think she would say yes. Maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
And then if we can recognize those, can we do things, with them?
Okay,
let's that's
see.
what, those are the things that enable things to happen, right?
Here's one thing, Mike, that the three of us have in common that we do. We pick up a pen and we think visually. We think out loud, even when we're in a meeting. We Ben's talking, he circles the thing that he's talking, or you two are talking about something and I have a question, I quick put it down on a Post-it note somewhere else. So that to me is it's sense-making behavior that enables future possibilities we have not thought of yet, because we have artifacts. It's like a really stable skill set the three of us share that serves our sense making.
Yeah, I think.
Where did it fit here? I think it fit as sense making. We have drawing. We have a lot of that.
So that's
naming the conflicts.
Interesting. Yeah, it's very enabling for us. Okay, there's some weird stuff happening in my mind too, where it's like those stabilities. It's reminding me a little bit of the Snowden stuff around the conversations about scaffolding, but I think more in particular the points of coherence idea. Like, so I guess it's more conceptual, like between people, rather than like a material thing. But like we all default to sense making visually, or at least the three of us in this case. And so if we start doing that, like there's no question about that, and that enables all sorts of behaviors.
I'm just sort of, Mike, I'm just sort of highlighting a few that fit the bill that we were just talking about. Mike, can you find the one that was like about like getting language for stuff? There
was one that had like naming things.
Yeah.
Bottom left, yeah.
There it is. Okay. I'm trying to highlight some of the ones that are this thing that we're talking about. And by naming conflicts, I often mean just naming the tensions, like collaboration and competition, or extensibility and efficiency, or.
And these are things that the asking questions thing. You can learn that. You can learn how to ask a good question.
Totally.
So these are, like Ben's example, if he needs to learn something and now he knows he has to go to YouTube and he maybe has to buy some tools and he has to update his, there's a whole. These are doing things that you could learn how to do better.
You can, Mike, and you reminded me of something that made it onto my map, which has not made it onto this map, which is models. The way that I learned how to do those kinds of moves, linguistic moves, when people disagreed, was by watching other people. I'm like, oh, look at that. Somebody just got totally in their face and like challenged that idea they just put out. And look at how they're being so thoughtful and really considering, like really thinking hard about what the person just said and asking questions. Can you say more about that? And it was, that to me was key in learning how to do this.
Yeah.
Was seeing it in action. Models. I listed that as one of my dependencies. So I just want to get that on there.
That makes a lot of sense. And now that I'm seeing this in the way that we're talking about these things, so when Mike said that like these are things you can learn, I started thinking about like, oh wow, I put naming things really like far over here in stage 2, but what would I need to do in order to learn how to name things better? Like what? And I think that, okay, it's not so much that the model itself exists. Like, it's not so important that I took all the sticky notes and related them. Like, maybe that's actually, like, a waste of time. What's really interesting, though, is if we zero in on something that we care about, like naming things, and then we can ask the question, well, what does this depend on? Because its dependencies are what is going to dictate the ability for you to do those things.
I love this. This is just so helpful. Well, because for me, the naming of things, it's like, well, okay, this domain calls it this, and this domain calls it that, and this other domain calls it that.
Yep.
And what do these different names, how do they inform an ecosystem of our understanding of knots or constraints or, like that to me is so critical.
Yeah, and it tells me too that like, I made an attempt, right, of a model, and now we've identified a problem within that model that is interesting to dig into, and already I can tell that it's far too oversimplified in this instance of the model, because it's literally like, what does naming things depend on? The environment, reality, which
I love this though. I just love where this conversation is going now.
So like, what feels like the next thing? Is it to dig into that one problem that we've just identified?
I definitely don't want to leave it. Like, I'm not ready to leave it yet. Like, that feels like it's, and we're out of time. So I would say, yeah, can we keep going with that thread of the things that we do? The three of us do.
Yeah. What do we?
The way to describe it, like the things on the board that we identified as like
behaviors,
the actions we take, the moves we make.
Yep.
In these contexts.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which we have. I think we've got them there.
We do.
We do.
And Mike's already sorted the ontology, basically, right? Because he talked about outcomes over here, but then. Is it this column, Mike, that was like things that we do?
The next one to the left.
Okay, got it.
Big picture thinking, pattern spotting.
Yeah.
It's got naming things in there. Look.
It's got naming things. It's got making sense of things. It's got asking questions. Yeah, naming the conflicts. Okay, well that is some validation right there, because we just did it on the other place and I picked almost the same ones that you picked, or we probably just didn't get them all yet.
Excellent.
Connecting dots. Yes, we've got the fodder.
I said, so turn mine by 90 degrees and that feels good. I mean, I think for a lot of the naming things, this is where I like using other people's work. Yeah, I just enjoy
Me
reading.
too.
Read Venkatesh Rao and his consulting stuff, and he I can't think of any, but he names certain situations. Oh, it's one of those.
Yep.
Oh, right. Now I know. I'll be able to see it next time when it happens because I've got a name for it.
Yep.
And so
So we could identify some of the things that we have uncovered names for that we like that you've read, Mike, from his writing that have felt really important.
yeah,
And then we can also bring in the domains that the three of us pull on, because I tend to pull on some whacked ones, like my EE background and biology and evolutionary theory, and so it might be some fun way to bring in that space. Like, what models do we have, and can we find the overlap there of like, here's a thing and here's a name for it from these different angles.
Ooh, yeah. So here's a thing. Here's a name for it, and then like the different domains, perspective on that thing.
Can we do this again?
Oh, I guess. I'll have to really twist my arm.
I'm
No.
having so much fun.
Yeah, well, what I love about this is that they're like, they're probably, well, right now I can see there are like 6 people watching,
Right.
and like probably 2 of them are just absolutely enthralled, and the rest of the world doesn't care.
Yeah.
And still, this is worth doing because I
we
think
found our people, haven't we?
yeah,
Both of them.
yes, join us.
Both of them.
So far, I think it's Barbara and Bernie so far.
Right. Well, you know what I also notice is sometimes like my own thinking that happened a long time ago, someone discovers and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, this is so helpful. And it's like, at the time, nobody thought it was helpful at all.
Yeah. And what I hope to do too with these live streams is like cut out little parts that seem to be really interesting kind of prompts for people, and so they're like, oh, there's a bigger thing to go watch. Yay. So
Right.
I'm working on figuring that part out, but hopefully
Ooh, the teaser.
The teaser.
The trailer.
Yeah.
Teaser. The reel, the highlights reel.
The 2
Yeah.
minutes 15 seconds on Twitter. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for spending so much of your time and energy like thinking through this weirdness with me. Like, I know that it has been really open-ended, and I think sometimes this work is that way. It is speculative. It is gonna fail, actually. And if you find something, like, it's magical serendipity. It's
It is, I mean, from what I'm reading, is the nature of exploratory behavior. If you want it to converge and you need it to converge, you're not doing it. You're not like...
Which, like, thinking about the ways that you think about procurement, even when something's in Genesis, Simon's like, well, yeah, the only thing you can do is look at how much material they've used and how much time they've spent. Like, that's all you can do, because there's nothing else. Did you try stuff? Yes? Okay, you have explored. But, like, there's no, like, getting to an outcome. And that can be frustrating if your expectations, like, are different, I guess. And that's part of the thing. Okay, well, this has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you both. For everyone that's watching and who's come to join us in the chat, thank you for being here. Like, you mean the world to us. We're so grateful that you're here. Check the description of this video to follow Sue and Mike on the Twitters, and please take a look at lwm.events for future live streams and events. I'm gonna be doing like an office hours event in like June sometime, so take a look and join us. Love to see you, and thank you all.
Join us.
Join us in that part of the map. All right, bye everyone.